Can we agree that the fashion industry is still f***ed up? The fashion industry is responsible for 8 to 10% of global emissions. If it were a country, the fashion industry would be the 4th largest climate polluter. Corporations and brands and companies continue to get away with so much bullshit. It's on us as consumers to just buy less. Like, no, it's on the brands to produce less, and they're not going to produce less unless they get fined or there's more regulations and rules. What do they have to lose? Nothing right now. All they want is money. So let's get into it. Hey everyone, it's me, Cynthia. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about solutions to the fashion system. This ever so f***ed up fashion industry where brands continue to get away with so much bullshit, whether it's the greenwashing, the mass consumption, throwing clothes away into landfills around the world. It is so unchecked, and that's why I wanted to make this video today. So let's talk about some solutions to the fashion system for a more sustainable and ethical future with any action items or things that we can do that are free and easy, like petitions to sign and acts to support. I will link them at fashionsustainability.co/takeaction, so please go check that out. I'm trying to make it super easy for us to make a difference and support fashion system change without spending too much time or money on it, because you cannot buy your way into sustainability. Say it louder for the people in the back. I think that it's important to think about the ways that we can actually enact change in a way that will make a difference. The first being the impact receipt. Imagine that the next time that you buy a piece of clothing, it shows you the cost, like the actual cost. So you'll see the dollar value that you pay for the garment. You'll also see the amount of carbon emissions that were created, the amount of water used, and the amount of energy used. And I think that's a pretty good holistic view of the true cost of a garment. And the thing about this receipt and what I love about it is that it is proof to us that the brand is doing their job and being responsible for tracing everything that's happening behind the scenes for them to actually run their business. Be able to trace all of those 3 things on this impact receipt. They actually need to know all of the components that go into making that item of clothing, from all the energy used along the way, all the water used along the way, and then all the emissions along the way. So it really is this receipt for us as consumers to see, okay, this brand really is measuring everything across their entire supply chain. I think that is a great example of how we can keep these brands accountable to them saying that they care about sustainability. The fashion industry continues to be responsible for 8 to 10% of global emissions. If it were a country, it would be the 4th largest polluter. Like, that is insane to me. If left unchecked, the fashion industry is projected to use more than 26% of the carbon budget associated with a 2 degrees pathway by 2050. In the Paris Agreement, we talked about these science-based targets that we need to adhere to as a globe, not just in the fashion industry, but across the world, for us to reduce warming to 2 degrees so that we can sustain a future for us as a society. So that's why it's really important for us to continue to watch how companies operate so that we continue to have a planet to live on. You know what I mean? We all want these brands to now have their sustainability reports, their impact reports, where they're showing us what they're doing to align to this 2 degree pathway. But what does that actually mean at the end of the day if they're measuring these things and releasing a report every single quarter? I want that to then trickle down so that we see it as the end consumer of a piece of clothing. So I think that's why this impact receipt is brilliant. And you might be wondering, okay, well, we have this idea of this impact receipt, but how do I actually get a brand to adopt that? There's something called the Fashion Act right now. It is a piece of legislation, a bill that is proposed in New York. If you're New York based on May 7th, please show up. I'll leave details linked down below. I'm unfortunately in Toronto, Canada. It is so important to advocate for this act. As Canadians or people that aren't American, we cannot sign our name there, but you can sign your name and pledge on the Fashion Act's website itself. So I think those are really important things to do, because this act is basically how New York is going to hold all the major fashion brands that sell clothing in New York, which is almost every single brand, to science-based targets in their supply chains. Like, this act is literally being passed to hold these brands accountable, and I think that's why it's really important. And how that relates back to this impact receipt is because, in my mind, this bill is the first step. But then what is the government actually going to do to make sure that these targets are being met? I feel like this impact receipt would be such a good example, but we need to make sure as citizens that the bill gets passed First, please take 5 seconds to add your name to it. It's literally free. This is such a good example of how we can literally make a difference in fashion by supporting something that is not buying something. The second thing is how we can re-humanize our clothing. I feel like we've become so devoid of the people that are actually behind making our clothes. We kind of just see it as it's there. I don't have to think about how this piece actually came into existence. Having a tag like what Sahili Women is doing, where you see a photo of the garment worker that made your clothes and their backstory right there when you're in a store, will show you, okay, like this was actually made by someone real, and what I'm paying for is for them to have a fair wage and work in healthy conditions. And this also ties back to how a brand, like what would they need to do to be able to implement that? They need to know the exact person that made that item of clothing. To track that at a mass scale means that you need to be measuring and tracking all of your data and having that organized. And I think that's truly what needs to happen to see a tag on the final piece of clothing hanging in a store. You see the fabric content, you see where it's made, you see the washing instructions, and you see the person that made your clothing. Like, I think that that is incredible. This amazing atelier named Sahili Women is already doing it. We have an example. That is the most amazing thing about all of these different solutions, is we have real examples of them being used right now. Like, they are fully implemented by these brands around the world. So it's not like it's not doable. It's just that these brands don't really have a reason of doing them right now. If that became the standard across the industry, if you were to walk into a fast fashion brand where they didn't show that, you would have question marks. You'd be like, well, why don't you show the person that made it? How do you treat your workers if you don't even care to know who made it? You know what I mean? And I feel like that'll help us in this fight for getting all these garment workers paid a living wage. Take that a step further. I want to see the people that were behind making the fabric. Like, who put that fabric together? Who farmed the cotton that became this shirt? Like, show me all of those people. That would be incredible to me. Of the 74 million textile workers worldwide, and the number could be more now, 80% are women of color. So we're not just talking about women's rights and feminism, we're also talking about racial justice. And as a woman of color myself, like, this is why I care about where our clothes are being made. The next solution is no new synthetic fibers. Honestly, I don't know why this isn't being done already, but I think that all companies need to remove the use of synthetic fibers in their supply chains in the next 5 years. And that is a campaign that's being run right now by Standard. It's called their Filthy Fashion campaign. And if you really read about how integrated fashion is with big oil, it's going to blow your mind. I've been reading this report called Fossil Fashion by the Changing Markets Foundation. I'll leave it linked below. It's pretty lengthy, but it basically dives into how much oil is being used in the fashion industry. It's a really good read if you're interested in stuff like this, but a lot of the stats I pulled out from that report, I feel like that is such a good step in the right direction. And if we could implement that at scale, I feel like 5 years is really doable too, because why are we continuing to produce these fabrics that are so damaging to us? They take so long to break down. They shed microfibers into our waterways every time you do your laundry. Like, hello, that is so bad for us as consumers. There's just literally no benefit to it except for the fact that it is cheap to make. Like, polyester isn't even that high quality of a fabric. If we can ban the production of new synthetic fibers, I feel like that would be a win for all of us. But big oil does not want that to happen, and we know how much they pay to lobby for them to continue doing what they're doing and getting away with it. So we want to separate fashion from fossil fuels. Every year, the fashion industry uses 100 million tons of oil just for synthetic fibers, like not even for transportation or for manufacturing or anything like that. And the production of synthetic fibers like polyester for the textile industry currently accounts for 1.35% of global oil consumption. That is more than the annual oil consumption of Spain. There is no way that we need to be consuming more oil for the clothes on our bodies, especially when there's so much clothing already on this planet, than a whole country. The last solution is end-of-life responsibility. So I want to see all brands, all companies taking full life cycle responsibility of all of the garments that they make. And this doesn't just mean a recycling program where you can go and put your clothes in a bin and get $5 off your next order, and then they ship it away to be landfilled or incinerated across the world. What this truly means is that you can take a piece of clothing back. If it's in good condition, the company should mend it and resell it, because if they're producing quality goods, someone else is going to want to buy it. If it is not in great condition, then the fabric should be high quality enough where they can break it down and recycle it and reuse it in the creation of their new garments. And then let's say that they can't, and they have this textile waste left over after you've given them this piece of clothing. They should be fined for basically planned obsolescence, like literally manufactured obsolescence in their clothing. So creating all of these trendy pieces that they know that consumers are just going to throw away, and it's cheap enough that they don't really need to think about it. We all have so much clothing already that exists. We have a textile waste crisis. We have a problem with how much clothing waste and garbage that we have, yet we continue to produce so much. It's like these companies aren't even listening. The industry literally makes 100 billion garments every year. It's probably more than that now. And of that, 92 million tons end up in landfills. Imagine the fashion industry where every brand had to do that, where they took full responsibility and you could just give them your garment back. You would get a credit for it to shop at their store again, and they really did have to deal with this piece of clothing. I think that would really deter brands from producing at the scale that they currently do, and I want to see how that could be implemented, and I want to see more brands doing it. For the brands that are truly the ones responsible for all of these emissions operating at such mass scales, they're the ones that's going to hurt the most. All of these things are going to be the most costly for these big brands to implement, and they have the money to do so. So like, why can't we just regulate all of that? Those are my solutions to fixing fashion for a more sustainable and ethical fashion future. I'm super curious what your thoughts are on these things. Please, let's have a discussion in the comments below. If you have other solutions, please leave in the comments too. I would love to hear them. It's always such a fun thing to brainstorm together. Sign all of these petitions and acts. I'm gonna leave them in my description box. It's at fashionsustainability.co/takeaction. And then if you want to follow me on Instagram, I am posting more on there. Again, it's at Inspiro. I have all of these stats and really nice little posts for you if you want to repost and share with your community. I'm excited to see all of the good, and I'm focusing on all the good, and I want to be hopeful that we can change. That's it for today's video. I really hope you guys enjoy. Please leave a like if you do. It really helps me out. This is the content that I find is so fun to make. It really makes my day when I see that you guys appreciate and like this type of content too. So whether you hit that like button or you subscribe if you're new here, yeah, I'll see you wherever I see you on the internet or in real life. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting and watching to the end. I'll see you in my next video. Bye everyone.